Hello everyone, Eddie Smith here with Midwestern Marks. Just thought I'd hop on and do a video. I got this new microphone, pretty sweet stuff. So I want to do a video talking about the occupation of Afghanistan mostly, which is a 19-year occupation now. And if you didn't know, you can go to the military or you can go fight for the military when you're 18. So we have a 19-year war that we are sending 18-year-olds to, which means that these people were not even born when the occupation of Afghanistan began. So now it's looking like Joe Biden is going to be our next president. As we know, Joe Biden has no intention of declining the American empire. He wants to maintain the empire as well as maybe expand it. And we often talk about wars. The last video I did on here, I was talking about Syria, China, Libya, or sorry, not Libya, Venezuela, and Iran, the main targets of U.S. regime change. But I think it's also worth mentioning Afghanistan because there's a reason we've occupied the country for 19 years. And that reason is that Afghanistan is essentially a neo-colony. Outside of Kabul, the main city of Afghanistan, it's essentially a feudal state where the U.S. military is exporting giant amounts of opium and saffron, which are grown in Afghanistan, which they're able to use the Afghanis for extremely cheap labor and then ship these goods overseas, oftentimes illegally. It kind of is like a black opium market. The vast majority of people who live in Afghanistan, or not the vast majority, but the people who live around these opium fields have, of course, become addicted to opium, and they dip it like tobacco because that's how prevalent opium is there. And these people have very, very difficult lives compared to what someone in the first world industrialized United States or the West in general would be used to because of the U.S. occupation, which just blows open the whole fabricated idea that we're there for human rights, right? We're there to protect these people. Afghanistan is extremely poor. The Taliban, ISIS, and another group called the PUM, the People's Uprising Movement, are extremely big still in Afghanistan, and they're still fighting constantly. So the idea that we have brought democracy and freedom and peace to Afghanistan is such a blatant lie. And anybody who's been there knows that. I haven't been there myself, but I've gotten the chance to speak with some anonymous people who have told me about it, and then I backed up everything they've told me with a lot of research. I would recommend checking out Abby Martin's Empire Files, her piece on Afghanistan. But I just want to go over some of the things here that people might not know. So I already mentioned the huge opium production, and it's essentially a neo-colony, and the region's entirely destabilized now. So ISIS and the Taliban, like in the U.S., we often tend to think of these extremist groups as they're all united, right? Like they hate the U.S. and that's their whole goal is to destroy the U.S. But it's much more complicated than that. The Taliban and ISIS have been fighting each other for the last 20 years now, while also fighting the U.S. And the U.S. at times works together with ISIS, and they at times work together with the Taliban. And now there is a third group, U.S. funded and backed, the PUM, P-U-M, People's Uprising Movement. And essentially what scholars are starting to point out is the U.S. backed this movement, right? And they're like, this is a good movement. This is a democratic movement. This is going to bring democracy to Afghanistan so we can get out. But it really wasn't that. It was just insurgents who the U.S. could pay to do some of the more dangerous military work, right? Why send U.S. troops when you can send Afghanis from the PUM who you're paying with, it's not, Afghanistan is extremely poor compared to the U.S. So what the military can offer the people who live there, it can change their lives, and they can essentially make people pawns of the military, which is what's happening with PUM. So in Afghanistan, in the warm months, it's called the killing season. And that, or not the killing season, the fighting season. And that's because it's warm enough for them to start killing each other. It's a big thing. It's like through these months, this is when the fighting happens. And it's been that way for years now. As we're being told that our young people are being sent here to fight and die for peace, they're still fighting with the U.S. and with themselves. In Afghanistan, the region's entirely destabilized. still, and US occupation has done nothing but further destabilize them, because our goal isn't to stabilize the country. It never was. That was always a lie. Our goal is the opium. Opium is the saffron. It's the raw materials that can be exported out of Afghanistan at cheap prices, and make an insane profit for a few people. So there's the killing, or the fighting season in Afghanistan, and then in the winter is not the fighting season, because winter's huge. Like, there are people in Afghanistan who have to walk from their village every day to go get their water, or they can't eat. So, I mean, the kind of lives and the kind of struggles these people live are things we can't even wrap our heads around in the U.S. I've never not had the ability to go get tap water, but that is a reality for so many in the world. And it's because of the extraction of their resources, out of those countries, and the wealth from those resources goes to the West, to the U.S. And Afghanistan's a perfect example of that. The country's rich in resources, but these resources are being extracted at essentially slave labor done by Afghanis, and then is being shipped to the U.S., where pharmaceutical companies and whoever it is that's harvesting that opium in Afghanistan and selling it, whether it be illegally or illegally, are getting extremely rich off those materials. So the wealth of Afghanistan is being transferred straight to America. It's essentially a colony. They call it a neo-colony, but it's just a colony. The U.S. military sits there, they occupy it, and then they just ship resources to the U.S. and get insanely wealthy, while the Afghanis continue to kill each other, and we can continue to tell people in the U.S. we're here for human rights. So it's really, it's just one of the most. It just exposes everything about U.S. imperialism. I mean, but anytime you drill down on an area where the U.S. is actually at, and you start looking into it, the more you get into it, the more you realize it's a lie. Right? The more you realize we're not in Afghanistan for freedom. If we were there for freedom, why are the Taliban bigger than they've ever been? Why are they fighting with ISIS? Why are people making millions and millions and millions of dollars exporting saffron and opium out of Afghanistan, yet people still don't have enough money to eat or to drink? I mean, it's a joke. The idea that we're bringing peace and freedom and stabilization to this region. It's a colony. We've almost put them back. They hardly even have capitalism. They almost have feudalism, right? The U.S. military bases and the people who in charge of those bases are essentially feudal lords, to the Afghanis in the area. So now with Biden as president, I mean, we got to start getting on him about this stuff. Not only do we have to watch and make sure there aren't any new wars that get started with Iran or whoever else. We now need to be careful. We don't need to be careful. We need to be careful of that. But we also need to be arguing to end where we are, ending the current occupations, right? We're doing nothing in Afghanistan. We're keeping the region destabilized, right? And we're not allowing one group to actually come to power and stabilize the country in any way. We're not supporting that. All the groups we support are these